The rain wasn't just falling. It was a solid, liquid wall trying to erase the world. I was fine with that. Let it wash away the road, the mountains, the whole damn state. Let it wash away the memory of his face when he said it was over. I was running, and I didn't have a destination, only a direction. Away. The old sedan shuddered, wipers slapping a frantic, useless rhythm against the deluge. Then came the cough. A metallic, gut-sick stutter from the engine that I'd been ignoring for 1,000 miles. It coughed again, sputtered, and with a final pathetic sigh, the car died, rolling to a stop on the shoulder of a road that had dissolved into a river. Solitude, it turned out, was colder and wetter than I'd imagined. Headlights cut through the gloom, slowing as they approached my dead car. A heavy-duty truck, the kind with tires that could climb a mountain, pulled up behind me. I wasn't looking for a savior. I wasn't looking for anything. But one found me anyway. He knocked on my window, the sound muffled by the storm. I rolled it down a crack, and a gust of wind and rain blasted my face. He was a silhouette against his own headlights, broad-shouldered and solid, wrapped in a worn canvas jacket. Engine trouble? His voice was a low rumble, calm against the storm's fury. You could say that my own voice was tight with frustration. Pride, that stupid, useless bastard, was telling me to wave him off. He just nodded, his gaze taking in my city clothes and the useless shell of my car. Road's gonna wash out soon. You can't stay here. I've got a place a few miles up the hill. I can tow you. It wasn't a question. Dependency felt like swallowing glass, but so did the prospect of freezing to death in a metal box. I killed the ignition, the last of the dashboard lights flickering out, and stepped into the storm. The wind nearly took me off my feet. He didn't offer a hand, just waited, patient as a stone, while I gathered my bag. The tow chain clanked, a sound of grim finality. I was no longer running. I was being dragged. His cabin was small, made of dark, weathered with that smelled of pine and rain and wood smoke. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a low fire already crackling inside, casting dancing shadows. He moved with an economy of motion I found unsettling, shucking his wet jacket and hanging it on a peg by the door. I stood dripping on the welcome mat, feeling like a stray dog he'd reluctantly brought in. "There are towels in the bathroom," he said, gesturing with his chin. "And some dry clothes on the hook. Might be big on you." He didn't wait for a thank you, just went to the fireplace and stoked the flames. The clothes were a flannel shirt and worn jeans, and they smelled like him, like cedar and clean earth. They were, as predicted, too big, but they were warm. When I came out, he had 2 mugs of something steaming on a low wooden table between 2 worn armchairs. He was staring into the fire, his profile carved by the flickering light. I saw him properly for the first time. A strong jaw dusted with stubble, lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into the sun, and a quiet stillness that felt ancient. He wasn't handsome in the polished way I was used to. He was elemental. "Drink," he said, pushing a mug toward me. It was tea, hot and sweet. I wrapped my cold hands around it, the ceramic a small anchor in the churning sea of my emotions. We sat in silence, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the roar of the storm outside. The quiet should have been awkward, but it wasn't. It was heavy, weighted. "I'm Sam," he said eventually, his eyes still on the flames. "Leo." He nodded. That was it. No questions about where I was from or where I was going. He just let the silence stretch again, giving me room I didn't know I needed. For the first time in days, the frantic buzzing in my head began to quiet. I found myself watching his hands as he held his mug. They were calloused and capable, the knuckles scarred. Hands that fixed engines and chopped wood. Hands that knew how to hold on to things. Unlike mine. The next day, the rain hadn't stopped. The radio confirmed the road was impassable in both directions. We were stuck. I felt a fresh wave of panic, a caged animal feeling, but it was muted by a strange, reluctant sense of safety. Sam seemed completely unperturbed. He made coffee on the stove, fried eggs and bacon that sizzled and popped, filling the small cabin with a rich, comforting aroma. I offered to help, but my fumbling attempts in his small, efficient kitchen only seemed to get in the way. "You're a city kid, aren't you?" he asked, not unkindly, as I nearly dropped a plate. There was a ghost of a smile on his face. "Is it that obvious?" I retorted, my defensiveness a flimsy shield. "You move like you're afraid the floor is going to give out." He took the plate from me with a steady hand. "Just sit. Coffee's ready." I spent the morning watching him. He moved around his small world with a quiet competence that was both intimidating and mesmerizing. He split firewood with a fluid, powerful grace, checked the seals on the windows, and worked on some piece of machinery at a heavy wooden workbench in the corner. His movements precise and unhurried. He never filled the silence with idle chatter. When he spoke, it was purposeful. And when he was quiet, it was a comfortable, solid thing. That night, after a simple dinner of stew, the fire was burning low. The storm had eased to a steady drumming on the roof. The forced proximity was wearing down my edges, chipping away at the fortress I'd built around myself. "You never asked why I was out on that road in the middle of nowhere," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Sam looked up from the piece of wood he was carving. "Didn't figure it was my business. Figured you'd say if you wanted to." The simple, non-judgmental acceptance was a punch to the gut. It disarmed me completely, and the words just fell out. I was leaving. Someone. Something. It ended badly. I didn't give him the details, the shouting matches, the betrayal that felt like a physical wound. I just gave him the shape of the hole it had left. I thought if I drove far enough, I could outrun it. He set his carving down and gave me his full attention. His gaze wasn't pitying. It was just present. "Some things have a way of catching up," he said softly. "No matter how fast you drive." I let out a shaky breath, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Yeah, I'm learning that." I looked at his hands again, at the old, faded scar that cut across his left palm. I nodded toward it. "What about you? You seem content, being so far from everything." He was quiet for a long moment, tracing the scar with his thumb. "I had a life in a town once. A wife." He said the word like a fragile, precious thing he was afraid of breaking. "There was an accident. On a road just like that one, in a storm just like this one. I came out here afterward." The quiet helps. He didn't say more, but he didn't have to. The shared space between us was suddenly filled with the ghosts of our respective griefs. He hadn't just offered me shelter from the storm. He'd shown me his own. In that moment, the tension between us, the friction of stranger and rescuer, dissolved into something softer, more fragile. A thread of understanding, spun in the firelight. The next day, the third day, the air between us had changed. The silence was no longer just comfortable. It was charged. Every time our hands brushed as he passed me a plate, every time I caught him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, a current passed between us. I found myself cataloging the little things about him. The way his hair curled at the nape of his neck, the low timbre of his voice when he spoke to his old dog, the focused intensity in his eyes when he worked. My internal monologue, once a frantic scream of pain and anger, was now just his name over and over. Sam, Sam, Sam. That afternoon, I was trying to help him bring in more firewood, clumsy and useless as ever. A splinter, long and vicious, drove itself deep into my palm. I swore, dropping the logs. "Let me see," he said, his voice instantly losing its patient distance. He took my hand in his touch surprisingly gentle. His callous thumb brushed against my skin, and the world narrowed to that single point of contact. He led me inside to the kitchen table, the light from the window illuminating the raw, angry wound. "This is going to hurt," he warned, his voice low. He held my gaze as he expertly worked the splinter out with a pair of tweezers, his focus absolute. A sharp sting and it was over, but he didn't let go of my hand. He just held it, his thumb stroking the back of my wrist, his eyes searching mine. The air crackled. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one building in that small cabin. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the steady rhythm of the rain. He was so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the scent of sawdust and soap on his skin. This was the turn, the moment where everything shifts and can never go back. He was still holding my hand, his grip firm but gentle, and I knew, with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty, that if I pulled away, he'd let me go. But I couldn't. I leaned in, just a fraction of an inch, and his eyes darkened. He finally released my hand, but the space between us remained electric. The rest of the day passed in a haze of unspoken tension. We moved around each other like magnets, repelling and attracting, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. I was terrified. The last person I had trusted had shattered me. How could I even consider this? But looking at Sam, at his quiet strength and the profound kindness in his eyes, felt different, felt real. That night, the storm returned with a vengeance, rattling the windows and howling like a wounded animal. The power, which had flickered on and off, finally died for good, plunging us into the intimate darkness of fire and candlelight. "I should go," I said, the words tasting like a lie. "Tomorrow, if the road is clear. I've imposed on you for too long." Sam was standing by the fireplace, one arm resting on the mantel. The firelight carved his face in strokes of orange and black. "You're not imposing," he said, his voice a low rumble. "And you're not going anywhere in this." He turned to face me fully. "Why are you so determined to run, Leo?" "Because it's easier than staying." I confessed, the truth raw and painful. "It's easier than letting someone in, just to have them tear you apart when they leave." He closed the distance between us in 2 long, silent strides. He stopped right in front of me, so close I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. "What if they don't leave?" he asked, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. He raised a hand, not to my face, but to the frantic pulse beating in my throat. His fingers were warm, his touch a brand. "What if they want to stay?" And that was it. The dam broke. All the fear, the pain, the desperate, aching loneliness of the past few months. It all came crashing down. He didn't kiss me. He just held my gaze, his thumb stroking my skin, giving me every opportunity to back away. I didn't. I leaned into his touch, and a shudder went through his entire body. I closed my eyes, and he finally lowered his head, his lips meeting mine. It wasn't a kiss of frantic passion, but of deep, aching relief. It was a question and an answer, a promise and a prayer. It tasted of wood smoke and sweet tea and a quiet, steadfast strength I never knew I needed. Felt like coming home. The next morning, the world was silent. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean, glittering under a pale, watery sun. I woke up tangled in blankets in his bed, his arm thrown protectively over my waist. For the first time in a long time, the familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach was gone, replaced by a quiet, fragile warmth. He was already awake, watching me with an expression of such unguarded tenderness it made my breath catch. We didn't speak for a long time. We just lay there, listening to the sound of water dripping from the eaves, the world starting anew. The roads would be clear soon. I could get my car fixed. I could keep running. The thought held no appeal. The open road, which had once seemed like freedom, now just felt empty. What was out there that could possibly compare to the quiet safety I'd found right here? He finally spoke, his voice a sleepy rumble against my ear. "The coffee's not going to make itself." I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "I guess not." I turned in his arms, pressing my face against his chest, breathing him in. The future was a blank page. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow or next week. But as I lay there, listening to the steady, reassuring beat of his heart beneath my ear, I knew one thing for sure. I was done running.